If you love classic contemporary Christian music and the people that made it, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to help support us and keep us going. This is Stage Right, and I am your host, John Thorne. They say if you die with a handful of friends, you die a rich man. Well, I have several buses full, and I'm very excited to share them all with you. Welcome to Stage Right. I am your host, John Thorne. I appreciate you joining us today for episode 5, featuring my good friend Billy Smiley from WhiteHeart. Billy will be joining us here in just a few minutes. I want you to think to yourself, do you have a friend that if you haven't seen him in a few years, when you get together, you spend the day together, then you have dinner, and then you go back and hang, turn on ESPN, and then the next thing you know, the sun's coming up because you sat up all night and talked? Now, if you were to ask my friends, they would tell you I am probably that guy for them. But for me, out of all the friends I have, most of them value sleep now more than they value hanging out all night. But there's one friend I can always count on to stay up all night, and we talk anything from politics to sports to music, photography, video, you name it, we talk about it. And it's inevitable at some point the conversation, regardless of the topic, always comes around to how to be excellent, how to be better, how to be good at what you do. And so next week will be a fantastic show. I can promise you that. I'm excited for you to hear from Jay Wilkinson. So before we get to Billy Smiley, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Hey Rockstar provides digital marketing software and services to generate more leads, more exposure, and more revenue for your business or organization. Let Hey Rockstar amplify your awesomeness.
Amplify your awesomeness with Hey Rockstar. Go check them out, heyrockstar.com. So before I bring Billy Smiley onto the program today, listen to this. Petra, the Imperials, One Bad Pig, Sandy Patty, Susan Ashton, Rachel, Newsboys, Margaret Becker, WhiteHeart, Jeff Moore in the Distance, Gold City Quartet, and on and on and on it goes. 40 years of putting his fingerprints all over Christian music. You know him, you love him. You also know his music and you love his music. He is one of the co-founders of the Christian rock band WhiteHeart, my great friend, Mr. Billy Smiley. Hey, Bill, how you doing today, buddy?
I am doing just great.
Fantastic. So just so I know, are you in Phoenix or Nashville?
I am in Phoenix right now, and it's about 103 degrees, and it's beautiful.
103.
Yeah.
It's about 45 and raining in Michigan today, which is why you didn't move to Michigan when you left Nashville.
Yep.
But you did grow up here.
Yeah, I love the fall weather there, so, I kind of miss that.
Right.
And I do love the snow. Most people don't like the snow, but I do.
Well, if it keeps up like it is this week, it's going to skip color change and leaves falling and just go from summer to snow because it's really cold. So, hey, so let's start with this, Billy. Do you remember how we met?
Remind me again.
So in June of 1989, I had left Truth, and the guitar player in Truth at the time was Dana Capolino, and Dana knew Mark Niemer because the two of them played in a trio, an instrumental trio at the water park at PTL in North Carolina. Well, Dana knew that I was moving to town because I was playing for Margaret Becker, and he said, hey, I have a friend that needs a roommate. Do you want to get a hold of him? So Dana puts me in touch with his friend Mark Niemer. Well, Mark Niemer says, hey, I've got another guy I know that needs a place to live. He just got the bass gig with WhiteHeart. Would you care if he moved into our third bedroom? And I said, well, heck no.
I never knew that.
I don't know if you know this part of the story, but I actually went to Arkansas with Anthony the day he moved to town.
Yep, I knew that part.
His dad had this old pickup truck, and he had all of his stuff loaded in it, and it was hanging out over the edges all the way around the truck. It looked like the Beverly Hillbillies. So as we're leaving, Anthony says, well, you drive the truck first, drive for an hour or two, and then we'll switch, because the truck didn't have air conditioning, and his car did.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, well, I'll drive the truck first. So he's like, after a couple hours, we'll stop and switch. Well, we never stopped and switched. You know, Anthony, he just cruised all the way to Nashville in his air-conditioned Honda while I drove that old Ford pickup with no air conditioning.
Of course.
So the three of us had moved in together, and one of the first shows they did with WhiteHeart, because Anthony and Niemer were both playing for you guys, one of the first shows you guys did was down in Huntsville,
Right.
and you weren't taking a bus, you were just driving cars because it was only a couple hours.
Yep.
So I actually drove down and drove Niemer and Anthony to the show, and I met you that night.
Ah, I didn't know that.
That was the show. The Newsboys opened for you guys. Peter was the drummer.
Yep.
John James was still the singer.
Yeah.
Dark-haired guitar player, I think his name was Jonathan. He was still there. So
Wow.
I met you guys that night and got to know you a little bit. And then Anthony invited me out to the studio because you guys had started recording Powerhouse out at the Bennett House.
Right.
And I came out, and that led to you asking me to come out every day and shoot video.
How did it even lead to you shooting video? Did we talk about it?
I'm not sure how the video thing popped up because I got into video later. So I wouldn't have been walking around with a camera. Plus, video cameras back then were like $3,000.
And they were big and clunky.
Yes. Yep. So I don't remember exactly how, but I do remember the story. We'll get to that later on. The legend of Wally John.
The legend of Wally John.
You can tell everybody well, it was your idea, so you can tell them the backstory to it later.
I can't remember why I called you Wally John.
It was because you came up with this idea. You guys were new to Star Song.
Yep.
And you came up with this idea that this fictitious character.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like the vacation movie, like Wally World.
That's right, Wally John, yeah.
So your idea was that I had won a contest through Star Song to hang out and spend my summer with WhiteHeart.
Right, now it's coming back. And you were anointed.
I was anointed, so that's when I started shooting videos. So that's where all the Powerhouse footage came from there.
So I am the reason for you being a video guy then.
It's really possible. Now, I would always shoot video footage if I could, if I had it, like if I was at Disney World or whatever, I'd always rent a camera and stuff. So I've got a lot of video footage, but I'll give you credit for it because you're the first one that I shot in a recording studio.
Yeah.
And yes, it was your idea. All right.
I know you really wanted to be a bass player for Kiss, but I guess that's a whole nother story.
I could never that's a whole nother story. I would have Kiss or Aerosmith or Pink Floyd. I would have any of those. Before we get too far down the road, I want to go back because I don't want to focus on me. I want to focus on you.
Sure.
So just for the listeners, tell everyone how you ended up at Azusa Pacific University in California.
Well, it first started, I went via South Bend, Indiana. So we had a little church denomination, and everybody from that denomination always just went to Bethel College, and now it's Bethel University in South Bend, Indiana.
Right.
So, of course, I went there for a year, but I had been really impressed by a lot of the California groups, like Love Song, The Way, Mustard Seed Faith. These were all pre the industry in Nashville at all. And I adored all of those groups because I thought, man, these guys are playing music I like, and it's not boring like church music. And so I always envisioned maybe me someday just writing songs. I was a new songwriter. My main instrument was trumpet and flugelhorn, and I got scholarships. And then I just said, man, I'm going to go to California. And so Azusa was part of our denomination rather loosely, but two of us just kind of headed out, and that's where the journey kind of started, because I graduated with a music theory degree because I figured you'd need to, if you're going to be a writer, you got to kind of go to school and do that, even though that's not true. And then I ended up back in Indiana because when I graduated, I said, now what am I going to do with this degree? I had no idea. And so I joined the Gaithers. A friend of mine had played trumpet and was leaving them and said, man, you ought to try. There's a position open. So I came back there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And from Azusa, and I was wearing puka shells, cut off jeans, sandals, flops. And I was really initiated into California kind of lifestyle. And so I show up in Indiana with this outfit, and Bill probably thought I was from Mars, you know. And so that's how I got started with the Gaithers. They hired me, and he kind of liked me, I guess. And I produced the first 3 or 4 vocal band albums back when he loved quartets.
Right.
And so we toured with the trio, the Bill Gaither trio, but he also did this on the side. And he hired me, and then I hired Dan Huff to play guitars on the vocal band albums. And at the same time, Dan and I were writing songs. Bill let us use his studio, and Dan had moved there because he was flunking out at Belmont, and his dad, who did all the arrangements for Bill Gaither, said, "Bill, will you take Dan? I don't know what to do with him. Put him out on the road." So we became like these young guys that were really close friends, and that's how we started WhiteHeart. He wanted to play guitar, and I wanted to write songs.
So how old were you guys?
I was just graduated 1 year, so I was 21. He was 19, maybe.
Wow.
He's a couple of years younger. And we just became best friends right then and there because we were the really young guys,
Right.
that had joined. And then another guy named Steve Green, who I met there, he was with Truth as well. Because I don't know Wally John, because I still call you Wally John.
It's my stage name.
I don't know if you've ever really known, but I was asked to join Truth at the age of 12.
You were?
Yeah, because they would always come through. Do you remember a guy named Thurlow Spur, the Spurlows?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, they were all from the Detroit area where I grew up. My mom played for the Spurs piano, and they had heard about me playing trumpet, and they needed a trumpet player. They didn't know how old I was.
Oh, my goodness.
So they had called my mom and said, "Hey, can he join?" And she said, "No, he's 12," because I was really a pretty good trumpet player. That was my main kind of thing. And but I didn't join, and I never joined. But although I knew a lot of people in the both the Spurlows and Truth, because they all came from those same kind of connections.
Right. That's amazing, dude. 12 years old,
Yeah.
You could have been on the road with Truth.
With Truth, making what, $17 a day?
That's what it would have been. No, a week.
A week. Yes, that's right. It was weekly.
Yeah, because I was there in 87 through 89, and I made $35 a week.
Yeah. So Dan and I were the young guys, and in the Gaither Trio organization, there were 2 singers, Sandy Patty and Steve Green. And Steve had formerly been with Truth. And so we really became good friends as well. He was kind of a crazy guy, kind of like a Steve Martin, if you can believe it, and was fun on the road. And we had great times. And Mark Gershmel was kind of a serious guy, had lived up in Fort Wayne, and so he drove his van always back and forth to the Gaither thing. So I didn't really know him as well because he didn't live in the town of Alexandra.
Right.
And Gary Lund, Dan brought up. And so we were writing these songs. The very first WhiteHeart song was "Go Down Nineveh." And so we added, after I moved to Nashville, Dan's dad had a studio there and said, why don't we just start recording over there and let's try some of these songs. So that's how it really started.
Oh, that's amazing.
And you know that I used Petra's bass player and drummer at the time, and Dennis Holt played drums on one of the tracks.
Dennis played on one of your tracks?
A demo. Yeah,
right.
The demo, and then we added David after.
Oh my gosh.
But he was a friend. I don't know how all of those things happened, but my roommate was John Schlick, who played keyboards for Petra.
Right.
And so it was just, and Mark, their bass player, was my roommate, and I took his place when I moved to Nashville.
Mark Kelly.
Yeah, Mark Kelly, that's his name.
Wow. I met Mark one night outside the Petra bus.
Yeah. So that's how it all started at the beginning. And then we asked Mark to join, we asked Steve to join, and we asked Gary to join.
So you guys were basically a bunch of kids trying to start a rock band back in the early 80s when it wasn't common to have drums in church. People were still fighting it. That last generation that hadn't grown up with the Beatles, they were still looking at it, like drums and rock music doesn't belong in the church. What was it like for you guys trying to break a band in that environment?
Well, there weren't very many groups. There was Petra, who I had, they were not doing well. They'd been around 10 years and failed miserably.
Right.
And then there was a couple other groups from California. That's why I kind of went west. And Dan had no clue as to any of these groups. I had to show him Phil Kagi. I had said, you got to hear this guy. We just wanted to do the music that we liked, which at the time was Zeppelin, Toto,
Right.
Boss Gags,
Steely Dan.
Yeah, Steely Dan. Those were the groups that influenced everything that Dan and I really liked. He loved Al Di Meola and Bill Withers, and you could hear it on the early WhiteHeart records. There's that R&B soul because Dan sang as well. And then Mark had brought a couple of songs in when we had asked him to join. He had brought He's Returning, which is this powerful anthem that Steve Green just killed. And I remembered we did the whole song with Steve Green. I don't think I've told anybody ever this, but Dan and I were producing the record, and Dan looks at me and it goes, it feels like a little of the man from Glad, this strong singer. So he said, let me get in and sing the verses. So we replaced Steve's verses with Dan singing the verses. And if you go back to that first album, you'll see it really loosens it up in a good way. And that's where we started always having two singers do songs and different people singing leads.
Right. So after the first album, Steve didn't stick around.
He did stick around for a little of the second album. It just wasn't in his comfort zone. He grew up with missionary parents who thought that even the Gaither Vocal Band was a wild group.
Right.
So the departure to do rock and roll was really not in his system comfortably to perform live. He could sing it really, really well, but he didn't feel it like, Dan and I did. And Mark grew up with a lot of soul. He played with, I think it was the OJs.
The OJs,
and he grew up with a lot of those kind of groups, and so knew the structure of pop music and R&B and soul. And Mark and I, from the beginning to the end of WhiteHeart, pretty much wrote and co-wrote all the songs.
That's wild.
Except for when we added Gordon for Freedom. And then at the end where we added sometimes Anthony or Brian would have a riff or something. And that was the kind of the continuation of the WhiteHeart songwriting through the whole career.
So you and Gersh were the primary songwriters throughout WhiteHeart. That brings me to something that I was so excited to talk to you about and break down, because we've talked about a lot over the years, but most people don't know. They hear a song and they like it, but they can't tell you why they like it. So when it comes to writing songs, what makes a great song to you?
Well, for Mark and I, during the whole thing, it was just reflecting where we were at. The WhiteHeart songs and the albums from Hotline to Vital Signs to Don't Wait for the Movie usually came from one or two songs that we were writing at the time and were important. And then it kind of steered the direction. When we wrote after Freedom, we did Powerhouse. We were trying to do more things that would reach youth groups. So thus the term Powerhouse.
Right.
Because we had seen a lot of youth group centers called the Powerhouse. And so we had seen what Petra had done with a lot of youth groups. And we had never really done that. We just focused really on the music and making the music excellent. And we were so fortunate to have some of the greatest players in the music industry. I don't know how that happened, but I think we just set our bars up high. And it started from having Dan in the group, who was an incredible guitar player. And it just kind of continued on, and somebody would refer us to, well, check out this guy or check out this guy. So the lineage of Whiteheart always varied, but it kept the consistency of the songs all the way to Redemption, which was our last album.
Right. Do you have any idea how many songs you've written that you've been a part of?
Probably 1,000,
Wow.
maybe 1,200. I don't know, because I do as much writing now. I've started a label called Music City Collective with 4 labels under it, and I work with about 30 different artists of all styles, from worship, which is one of the smaller parts of it, to country and rock and pop and R&B and soul. I do a lot of that because the the Christian music industry has certainly changed, in the last 10 years or so.
So does it change about every 10 years from back in the early 80s when you dove in?
Not, I don't think it really changed until worship kind of came and changed up quite a bit.
Right. Okay, so I've known you a long time, so I know a lot of the songs you've written, but what is one song you wrote that shocks most people when they find out you wrote it?
I wrote the Imperial song because of Who You Are, and Sandy had cut it. So 2 of those groups, that was my first #1.
Wow.
And I did a lot of songs for Sandy Patty Records because we were on the bus together with Gaithers, and I would always be writing and playing her the latest song I wrote, and she always needed up songs.
Right.
So I wrote a lot of up songs, and she loved them, and I wouldn't even have to demo them. It would just, she'd go, send that to me, and bam, off we'd go.
That is amazing. Now, the one that surprised me when you told me you had written it was the Clay Aiken's Christmas song.
Yeah, his grandmother had heard Sandy had recorded Merry Christmas with Love. It was her first Christmas album. And I had written it with a guy named Greg Davis over at Benson. So we had cut this song, and Sandy heard it there at Benson and said, I've got to do that song. She just loved the story of it. And then Clay Aiken's grandmother, I think, had that album.
Oh, wow.
I'd never met Clay Aiken, but he had then recorded it for his album called Merry Christmas with Love.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So he possibly recorded that because his grandmother loved it.
Yep.
That is crazy.
And that's how the weird things kind of work in the music industry. Things that you would never expect would happen like that.
Right. You can't always make it happen. There's so many things that just happen that you can't force.
Yep.
Okay, now here's a curveball.
Okay.
If you could pick one song that you wish you had written, which song would it be?
In the world?
Anywhere, any song in the world.
Yeah, Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway to Heaven. That doesn't surprise me a bit. One of my favorite times ever, because of the camaraderie and because of we would play a show and then we'd get on the bus and we'd be about an hour after we left. And we'd all break out our CD pouches.
Yeah.
And this is back when nobody had streaming.
Right.
John Knox would show up with his briefcase with a 500 CD binder in it, and we'd all pull out our CDs and pass them around and go around the front lounge with 6 or 8 or 10 of us, however many were up. But we would take turns, and everybody got to play a song, and it would go on for hours.
Yeah.
And it was always the best music ever recorded. And you would always play Steely Dan.
I would always play, probably the whole Asia album was an album that I just loved.
Yes, you did. It was such a unique experience getting to sit there with all you fantastic musicians and watching you pull out a CD and put it in and listen to it as if you were 12 years old again.
Yeah.
And we had so much fun laughing and talking, and it was almost like you got a doctorate degree in music just being in that room with everybody and listening to what they thought about music and what made this song great and why I loved it and what I was doing at that point in my life. It was just, it was one of my favorite times ever.
Yeah, it was a fun time.
For sure. Now, producing, you produce a ton of people. Oh my gosh, every time I dial into your Facebook, you're putting out a new album with somebody. Tell everybody what a producer actually does, because I don't think they understand that part of the equation.
Well, for me, it's being that part of an artist's life that helps formulate what their songs and what their sound represents. I just love that.
Right.
I love being a songwriter first, so it always does start from songs. And I love the fact that it does start from songs, but it's also like a movie director. In music, it's a music producer, but they do the same thing. They figure out who to play on a song, who represents, who could capture, what the artist is going for in terms of style
Right.
and stuff. So that's important as well.
Now, do you ever hear someone who's trying to be a certain thing and you you take them in a different direction because you hear in them that their strength is something other than what they recognize?
Not really. You really don't want to try and change somebody. You really, an artist is what they were raised doing, what they love doing, and you don't really want to change it. You just want to focus it
Right.
so that it becomes more defined and focused versus trying to change somebody's art.
So basically, their influences determine who they are.
I think so. That's why there's so much diversity in music. If you had a BB and CC Winans, you wouldn't change them having their church influence,
Right,
you
right.
know.
Okay, so then when you sit down to write with an artist, are there artists that come in where their songs are all good?
Some there are, and some they need help. Some they might need a chorus, a verse. Everyone's different. You don't really you add or detract based upon what their needs are.
Right.
I mean, I really you have some producers that have to write on everything, and I don't like that approach. I just think it's got to be if an artist needs help with something, they're trusting me to help define, exactly what that should look like. And that's really fun, but it's also important to make sure you don't overstep your bounds because it's not your record.
So being such a good trumpet player, I imagine you were a Chicago fan?
Yes, oh yeah.
Okay, so I just recently watched a documentary with Chicago, and then I also watched another documentary off the record with David Foster, the producer that they brought in.
Yeah.
After hearing both sides of that story, what's your take on a band bringing in a producer like David Foster and then him leading them in a completely different direction?
Yeah, he was all about himself.
Right,
But, he was really eyeing on Peter Cetera,
right,
and, because Cetera then left the group.
right. It was almost like David Foster was his manager at that point.
Exactly, and he kind of was. I'm not saying that's bad or good. I'm just saying that's the kind of.
So that's trusting a producer to come in and help you, and then it ends up sabotaging.
Well, it did help them because they even from 25 or 6 to 4,
Right,
even those were career songs. They weren't your normal pop radio standards, but it defined their sound better.
right.
So I probably would have liked to have done more of those songs with them because that was the ones that mirrored the group with all of their gifts rather than the other songs, which were great songs too.
Right.
I loved them all.
Sure. Okay, so let's shift to this. You work with young, great artists all the time, every week, and you've done so for the last 35 or 40 years. Why is it that the perception is you're more creative in your 20s and early 30s than you are in your 40s and 50s? Why do you think that is?
Well, because I think right then, it's not so much being creative, but it's more of you're trying to put your mark on to life and to do something that affects that generation, which is into discovering new things more
Right,
so.
right.
There is so much talent. Like I feel like I've been writing better than I ever have,
Sure.
but it's because I know a lot more. But again, culture, you won't see 40, 50-year-olds
Mhm.
going to download on iTunes all the new music.
Right.
They grew up with the influences that they had at 20.
Right.
So in order to answer that, I just think the 20s are the whole era where you are a total sponge,
Right.
and it mirrors culture at that time of people that buy and consume whether it's videos, TikTok, music
Makes
or
sense.
whatever. Music, even though it's not as easy today to make a living at it because
Right.
there's not just the big companies that sign groups and just did albums only,
Right.
the music is still as impressionable, but it's just consumed in different ways.
So it's not that you're more creative in your 20s, it's that you're more ambitious, more focused. You still dream, you still imagine, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for a 52-year-old. It's not impossible, but actually, in today's world, it's almost more easy whether you're 30, 40, 50, or 60. I have a lot of 40, 50, and 60-year-olds that are doing music for the first time because they can,
Right.
which is fun. It's exhilarating because they don't have the same, well, let's write a hit.
Right.
They're doing it for the pure joy of doing what they never did as a teenager.
More people are making music than ever because of home studios and stuff.
Yeah. And there's a lot more junk you have to wade through because of that.
Right.
But, it still makes for a creative time.
Right. Have you ever told anyone no when they ask you to produce them?
Oh, yes, of course.
Now, what would the reasons be?
Well, usually they're not ready or they don't have the thing that I'm looking for. I've been blessed to at least have people that are reasonably gifted at what they do. And
Right.
I'm excited. I work with artists that I at least feel like I can help them with who they are and take it to a different level.
Right.
Because if I don't do that, then it just becomes a job.
Yeah.
And I don't do music because of a job. I'm helping a school in Nashville right now called Jubilee, and half of the class are in China. So
Oh,
we
wow.
do Zoom things, and I just teach them about songwriting. And I love that because it's pouring what I've learned into other people in other countries and other cultures.
Dude, that is so awesome. For everybody that thinks Billy Smiley is just WhiteHeart, Google Billy Smiley. Check out how many songs he's written, how many albums and artists he's produced. It is crazy how busy and how hard the guy works. Bill, every time you and I catch up or talk or when I see you, it's remarkable how resourceful you are and how many different people you find to work with.
Well, we do eat pinconning cheese and we play a lot too.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we've been known to tackle some Thai food from time to time.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, off the top of your head, give me 5 albums you've produced that you're the most proud of. And I'm stopping you at 5 just so it doesn't take you all night.
Wow. Well, a couple of the WhiteHeart ones. Don't Wait for the Movie.
That was fantastic.
First WhiteHeart album, just because it was your first venture into that. Jeff Moore, probably he had a song. He had an album called Over the Edge, which it wasn't really popular, but he was wanting to be the Christian version of like Bruce Springsteen. And really good musicianship. A lot of the WhiteHeart guys played on that, from Dan, and
Okay.
I got to work with Johnny Cash, which
Oh,
was a
wow.
huge honor. So that was really, really nice to produce. I produced a group. I don't know if it's some of my favorite offerings ever, but it was certainly fun and out of the box because it was a group called One Bad Pig.
Oh, my gosh. That's right.
And I did all of their records, and we had a great journey with Word Records on them.
Dude, they were a trip.
I did a group that was really, really talented with Forefront, which was called The
I
Normals.
did not know that.
Andy is a very deep thinker, great musicians. They had opened for WhiteHeart from Illinois, so that's why we called them The Normals.
The mark you've made, not only in the past, Bill, but the mark you continue to make is quite remarkable, dude. It's a lot of people you've helped. You've got a lot to show for all the hard work, all the miles traveled, all the time you've put into it. It's pretty crazy.
But I've had a lot of fun. A couple of new groups that I'm really proud of are Roscoe Johnny, which these are brand new. People haven't even heard about them, but hopefully they will. They're kind of like Civil Wars. It's a trio.
Roscoe Johnny.
There's a couple of R&B soul records with Ida Marie, which is an Australian, and Irene Rock, which is a Nigerian. And love those. Caitlin Rushing is a singer-songwriter who writes incredible music, and a gal named Amanda Lynn who wrote this album called Rocket, which is kind of like a Chris Stapleton, a female version of it. So those are just some of the things lately I've been a part of.
I love it, dude. That is awesome. Go to northernshoreproductions.com to check out Billy's website, to check out his record labels and all of his artists. So northernshoreproductions.com. Buy someone you love some good new inspired music this year for Christmas. Okay, hey, Bill, I got a quick story for you.
Yeah.
So my daughter was in college, Bill. She was down in Florida, and she went to this concert, and she called me the next day because she was all proud of herself. She introduced herself to one of the guys in the band, and her and her roommate got to hang out with him for about a half an hour and talk, she said, after the concert, and she was so excited. And I said, well, what was the name of the band? And she said, the Technicolors. And I went, oh my gosh, I know the guitar player and the singer. And she said, what? And I said, well, I kind of know him. I said, I knew him when he was like 5. I said, but it's Billy Smiley from WhiteHeart's son. Take a minute, Bill, and tell everybody about your son and what he's got going on.
My son was with a group called the Technicolors. I had used him since he was probably 14 or 15. He was kind of a lot like a Dan Huff, kind of a prodigy, guitar player who was really, really talented and a different personality than Dan, but had the same kind of things. I mean, they're eerily similar, but he kind of went the course of Eric Clapton, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, where Dan went more Al Di Meola and studio guys. Brennan just wanted to be a music group and all of that, so he had formed the Technicolors. They've been touring it and hitting it hard. They have a new album coming out, but I love having him come to Nashville for 3 or 4 days, and he plays on a lot of the artists' albums quietly, because he doesn't perceive himself as one of those studio, guitar players. And what's nice about it is you think you have Mike Campbell from Tom Petty's group in the room, and he's just different. He approaches songs really, really good, and people love him, and I just love having him on all of the records that I do.
He's a fantastic guitar player for sure, but dude, I love the songs he writes with the Technicolors. He definitely has your gift for writing and music.
Well, he's like way better. I mean, you ought to hear this new set of them. I'll have to send them to you. It's pretty amazing.
I'd love to hear him, dude. I just know he is a chip off the old block because the old block was really, really good. So I appreciate you being on the show. Before I let you go, where are you headed? What's in the future for Billy Smiley?
Well, I do love, really, really love speaking into artists and music, and I feel as excited about working on the next project and the next song and the next production. It doesn't lose its flavor and its flair. And I'm so thankful that I can still do it and have an enjoyable time, doing what I do. And I've started a label called the Music City Collective.com. If people want to go, and there's 4 labels under there: devotionmusic.com, which is a worship label and Christian label, faith-based. Southern Sky, SKYE Records, which is artists that are either in country or Americana or folk. Shadowland Music, which is more world music, pop music, R&B, and then Cul-de-sac Records, which like the Union of Sinners and Saints is
Which I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to do another Union of Sinners and Saints album?
Yeah, we're working on it, but with COVID had kind of delayed everything. So we're John and I have written 2 or 3 new ones.
Right.
You actually did an incredible video. The response has been great from folks. We did the old song, I Still Believe. And so we're just in the process of writing, and hopefully by next year we'll be back out on the road. I still love doing that. I love the road. So
there's very few things in life that are better than hanging out with your friends on the road playing music.
Yeah. And we've had some fun ones in the last 2 years ourselves.
Absolutely. It's always a blast, dude. And the best part about it is there's always a next time. It never ends. 30 years and counting, we will keep the thing rolling. So you have quite a legacy, dude, to show for all your hard work and all the artists that you've helped and stuff. Give us a closing thought today before you hang up.
So I just hope to keep inspiring young artists and singers and songwriters to keep writing great and to not lose the zest of what music can do for people.
Right. It's powerful. That's why we got into it, and it continues to move people, speak to their soul and to their heart.
I couldn't agree more. So it's been great, Wally John, to hang out with you.
I always laugh, Bill, because you are the only one that calls me that. And I could be in a crowd. I could be in a room with 20,000 people. And if I heard that, I would know you were there. Okay, so just one more thing real quick.
Yeah.
I have to do this. There are so many things I know about you, dude, that crack me up and that we've laughed about over the years and stuff. And you're such a great friend. But the one thing, every time we would get an itinerary for a new tour,
Okay.
we would pull out the schedule and you would start circling cities where we had days off. And you would decide, okay, we need to stay here or we need to drive 2 hours on our day off so we can catch a baseball game.
Yep.
So our whole tour, the itinerary, was built around the Major League Baseball schedule.
Yep. I love doing that. And we did that quite a bit. You know, there was about 3 of us. We kind of took over the motivation for certain cities to have off days. But I remember San Francisco.
Yep. Denver, singing the national anthem at the Dodgers game.
Oh, yeah. Good memories.
Yep, for sure. All right, Bill. Well, man, I cannot thank you enough for this. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, it was really, really fun. Thank you for having me.
Right on, dude. I will see you soon.
Yep. Okay.
Hey Rockstar provides digital marketing software and services for your church to generate more interest, create more exposure, and reach more people. Let Hey Rockstar amplify the awesomeness of your ministry. And, as always, Hey Rockstar is a proud sponsor of the Stage Right with John Thorne podcast.
My thanks to Billy Smiley. My thanks to Hey Rockstar. And once again, my thanks to you for listening. Don't forget, next week, Jay Wilkinson. Like, share, subscribe. Tell all your friends about Stage Right. Have a great week.